Nestled between the provinces of Quebec and Ontario, Ottawa is an interesting mix of English and French culture, the urban and suburban. The city is located on the southern bank of the Ottawa River, within the Ottawa Valley, and it boasts of amazing countryside, scenery, forests, rivers, lakes, rolling hills, and some wetlands. Ottawa has quite a story to tell, from how this seemingly unknown Canadian region came out to be the nation's capital, to an exhilarating tale of counter-espionage, cats and spiders. Once upon a time, Kingston's flourishing port city was Canada's capital. It was chosen in 1841 due to its strategic location between Montreal and Toronto, where the moving forces of the country's economic, political, and military development actively shaped the nation. But not long after that, the title was passed down to its more exciting neighbouring city, Montreal. At that time, in 1844, Montreal was the place to be, a cultural hub with an interesting blend of French and English features. Montreal's rapid boom was evident in its numerous new edifices, such as government offices and institutions, which include the Parliament Building, as well as the prestigious McGill University and the Montreal Museum of Fine Arts. With all these developments, many people flocked to the city, and it became a significant epicenter of commerce and trade. But as it turned out, the glorious Montreal lost the title to the then bustling economic trailblazer. In 1849, Toronto became Canada's newest capital, owing to the presence of key government institutions. The Ontario Legislative Building, the seat of Ontario's Parliament, the University of Toronto, founded by Royal Charter as King's College, and the very first institution of higher learning in Upper Canada. 2 years later, the legislature, through a vote of 64 to 56, picked Quebec City as the permanent seat of government, a verdict that did not sit well with some members of the Parliament. To cut the story short, Queen Victoria, upon the request of Parliament, stepped in to address the issue and come up with a viable solution. And so in 1857, after reviewing each argument submitted by Kingston, Montreal, Toronto, Quebec City, and Ottawa on why they should be nominated for the permanent seat of government, the Secretary of State for the Colonies in London, England, found Ottawa to be the most fitting choice. And it is based on this recommendation that Queen Victoria finally decreed Ottawa to be the capital of Canada. Sealing the deal, the Ottawa Parliament Building's construction began shortly afterwards, as well as residences for the Governor-General and the Prime Minister. You might be curious as to what made this seemingly unheard of city the most fitting choice as the country's powerhouse. First, Ottawa is an ideal spot. It sits on a hill between the upper and lower Canadian border, making it safe from another American attack. You see, in 1812, way before there was even a capital city in the country, Americans marched on the Canadian soil to conquer the place. During their westwards expansion, Ottawa is deemed a defensible location to thwart another possible attack. Second, it lies between Toronto and Montreal, perfectly representing both the English and French, thereby preventing favoritism. All in all, it all boils down to geographic, social, and political grounds. Anyway, by the time Canadian Confederation was founded in 1867, bringing together Ontario, Quebec, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick into a federal union, Ottawa as the capital had developed into a flourishing metropolis with a burgeoning political and cultural scene, as well as a thriving economy and a diverse population. It was during the First World War that Canada managed to significantly expand its military arsenal and contribute to the Allied war effort. In between the First and Second World Wars, while experiencing economic challenges, the country made a remarkable achievement by creating the Royal Canadian Air Force to beef up Canada's air power capabilities. The Canadian Armed Forces continue to expand, taking part in various theaters of war across different continents. Not only that, but it also helped the Allied war effort by providing different defense assets, including troops, aircraft, and ships. This rapid military expansion and involvement with the Allied war activities caught the attention of the Soviet Union. Around that time, during the Second World War, the Soviets, just like many other countries, were engaged in intelligence gathering activities. The Soviets wanted to obtain information regarding Canada's diplomatic relations with other countries, its military capabilities, including technologies and defense plans. One significant event in this espionage game between Canada and the Soviet Union that many historians believe contributed to the Cold War's development involved a cipher clerk working at the Soviet Union's embassy in Ottawa. This event is also known as the Guzenko Affair. Guzenko was born on the 26th of January 1919 in Rogachev, Russia. His father lost his life defending the Red Army during the Russian Civil War. He went to the University of Moscow and took up architecture. He met his wife there and was still a student when the Germans invaded the USSR. And just like most able-bodied young Soviets, Igor was enlisted into the Red Army. But instead of being sent to the front, he was assigned to the Moscow headquarters of the main intelligence directorate of the Soviet General Staff, also known as the GRU. About a year into his post, he was tasked to accompany Lieutenant Colonel Nikolai Zabotin to Ottawa and handle transmissions to and from Moscow. He was later joined by his wife, who was at the time pregnant with her first child. He was responsible for coding and decoding messages between the embassy and Moscow. As the couple got accustomed to their new environment, they discovered, much to their astonishment, the sharp contrast in living conditions between Canada and their home country. From the size of the apartments where they were living to the material comforts and civil liberties. This and talks of the looming war between the Soviet Union and Western powers inside the embassy brought feelings of disillusionment in the young man. But he kept his doubts to himself until one day when the lieutenant colonel informed him that he, along with his family, was being recalled to Moscow. This directive worried Guzenko. The fact that he still had 2 years to go on his tour of duty when he was recalled meant there was some trouble, and he was not sure what it was or whether or not it was because of his own doing. Many thoughts came into his head, including him facing a possible execution. If he's a little lucky, he would only have to endure internment in a labor camp. Guzenko knew it was only a matter of time before he and his family had to go back and face whatever fate awaited him. Guzenko carried out his duty with the same dedication he had always done, day after day, while waiting for his departure back to Moscow. Everything was going as usual until that one fateful night that forever altered the course of history. He stumbled upon a top-secret paper detailing a Soviet espionage network operating in Canada. Igor was a loyal Soviet citizen, but he was also disappointed in the viciousness of the Soviet Union's government. The documents were enough evidence for him to realize that he was working for the wrong side. Guzenko claimed he felt loyalty to Russia, but not to the communist regime. He knew too much and had seen too much, and he knew he could never bear to keep silent about all the information. Guided by his conscience, Igor made a bold decision, one that is bound to put not only his own life in jeopardy, but also his family's. He decided to defect from the USSR. First, he obtained copies of implicating documents, and he did it over time, little by little, until he had collected 109 documents on the Soviet espionage activities in the West. He also timed the date of the defection, and he chose to do it on a Wednesday. On the night of 5th of September 1945, Guzenko left the embassy for the last time with the top-secret documents hidden beneath his clothes. He then sought the help of the Minister of Justice, the Ottawa Magistrates Court, and the Ottawa Journal the next day. He was unsuccessful at first, with the contacts not taking his claims seriously. The next night, they hid in a neighbor's apartment, while the Soviet police came to their apartment and raided it. The following day, Guzenko got in touch with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and divulged the critical information he had discovered. The Mounted Police confirmed the legitimacy of the documents and finally understood the gravity of the situation. A large-scale spy network was indeed in operation and had infiltrated not only the government organizations and military establishments in Canada, but also in the United States. What followed was a frenzy of meetings amongst the top Canadian, American, and British officials to discuss the alarmingly intricate nature of the Soviet espionage scheme. Meanwhile, the RCMP took the Guzenkos into protective custody, taking them to a top-secret spy training school called Camp X in Ontario. Around 5 months after the defection, the news was made public, and the Guzenko affair was a worldwide sensation and occupied the front page of every major news publication around the world. The Guzenko affair ushered in an era of Cold War as diplomatic tensions grew between Canada and the Soviet Union. The event also raised suspicions amongst other countries in the West, and a level of distrust strained their diplomatic relations. On the friendly grounds of Ottawa's Parliament Hill Cat Colony, a cat capital, if you will, the cats were brought to the hill as a means of pest control when rodents infested the area. As proficient rodent hunters, the cats did a very good job. Everyone was happy. But then, as rodent numbers decreased, the cats multiplied, and rather quickly at that. Soon there was a horde of cats roaming the whole place, including the newly constructed Parliament halls. Talk about cats taking over, maybe not the world, but in this case, Parliament Hill. The growing number of cats posed a problem for the workers of Parliament buildings. They eventually drove the cats away and used pest control chemicals in place of the furry rodent chasers. Thankfully, there were many well-meaning members of the community who took care of the cats. They were visited, fed, and looked after by office cleaners, groundskeepers, and the neighborhood cat ladies. In 1970, a group of local residents decided to build wooden shelters to protect the strays from the worst of the weather. They eventually built a multiple-floor cat condo, complete with cubby holes, verandas, boardwalks. Some of the cats even reached celebrity status, like the black and white cat called Smokey, who often took a fancy to sitting on the Prime Minister's lap. Parliament Hill cat's population dwindled through the years, mainly due to spray and neuter efforts. The surviving cats were adopted by the community members and some volunteers, and because no cats remain in the housing anymore, the shelters were removed. Needless to say, seeing cat houses go broke the hearts of many, since it's been a great part of the daily life in the community for so many years. Then there's also this giant spider in front of the National Gallery of Canada, called Maman, created by a French artist, Louise Bourgeois. The arachnid also features a sac with 26 eggs. Needless to say, Maman is a mama spider. Bourgeois associated the spider to her own mum, strong, protecting, and nurturing, carrying its marble eggs on its slender metal legs, evoking feelings of fascination and fear. Speaking of metal installations, another popular attraction in Ottawa is the Centennial Flame. It features a bronze sculpture of a maple leaf shaped just like a flame to complement the dramatic blaze that's been burning since the New Year's Eve in 1966. It also features a collection of bronze plaques highlighting the coats of arms of Canada's provinces and territories. It was created to mark the 100th anniversary of Canada's Confederation. The Centennial Flame is fueled by natural gas and was originally intended as a temporary art fixture, symbolizing Canadian unity. But seeing how popular the installation has become, it was made a permanent fixture on Parliament Hill. The flame does die out on occasion, usually intentionally, when it is shut off for routine maintenance. Otherwise, this national symbol burns all year round. So let me know what you think of Ottawa, and if you like this video. Next, maybe you'd be interested in a little bit of unnecessary information about Vancouver. Click right there. And this is my Patreon map. If you liked my video, then you can help me sustain this odd YouTube project, and I will add you to this fancy map. Alright, GeoPerspective out.